Hey class, today we're going to talk about form elements, and we're specifically going to be talking about having the option to have a radio button, so you could have a choice between two items. You could have a drop down with multiple items, or a checkbox. So let's get started. Now, form items have some of their own language, completely different from the HTML that we're used to. And there's a lot of CSS that goes with it. So we're going to jump down in the body of the index that I provided. In this index, all we have is a reset going on, and we also link to Font Awesome. Font Awesome is awesome. It allows you to add icons to your layout really easily. So if you go to fontawesome.com and check out some of their icons, you can take a look at the icons that could be added. There is a paid version and an unpaid version, but this is always great if you're looking for a Facebook icon, for instance, that you could use any of these Facebook icons and you wouldn't have to make them. They're almost like text. So if I click on this Facebook icon, I can come here and use, as long as I have this link in the top of my HTML, I could copy this link and use it on my page. I could change the color just like it was a font with the color, colon, whatever color you wanted it to be, and the size. So really great to utilize. So just a side note of how awesome Font Awesome is. But let's move on to forms. So if you want a form element in your HTML, you're going to have to start with form, action equals, and I'm going to put a pound sign in there. This pound sign, this action, is what you would want it to do after they fill out the form. So normally this would be attached to a PHP form, which then could send it to an email or a database or MailChimp, or wherever it is going to live is where this action would be. Since our site isn't really going anywhere, we're not going to put anything in it, but we're going to leave it there just in case one day we want this to function correctly. Then we're going to do a field set. So a field set is just a set of options. It's for forms specifically. And in there, I'm going to give it a legend. These are all new words, right? Where did these come from? So a legend's kind of like a headline for radio buttons. Do you have to use these words? No, but these are the terminology used by forms. So in this, I'm going to have an option. I want the option of saying yes or saying no. And after we have this, and you can I'm going to have this be live over here. You can see the text that says yes or no, and that's going to be in this legend. It's, again, like a headline. And then after that, I need a label and an input. So a label is going to be the label next to the button choice. So I'm going to do label for equals radio choice. And this terminology for is used for the action that we are not utilizing. But again, I want you to see that we need to include these for this to function if we wanted to email it to ourselves or so on and so forth. So I'm going to put for, and then we're going to, and I want to say choice 1. So this is going to be if they say yes, this label. Make it a tiny bit smaller. Okay, and I'm going to copy and paste that, and surprisingly, this next option is going to be no, and that's option choice 2. So now we're differentiating our two choices of yes and no. And then I also have to add the input. So the input is going to be any type of form element that they're inputting in. Let that be your first and last name. Let that be these buttons, a checkbox, a drop down. So I'm going to put input, and the type is going to be radio. So radio button. I'm going to give it a name. Radio choice. I'm going to give it an ID. So we can design this in CSS, choice 1, and a value, choice 1. Again, most of these, besides this is saying the type of button it is, you can see now we have this radio button. The name and the value are all used in forms. The ID we could use in our CSS. So I'm going to copy that and paste it underneath. So we have 2, and I'm going to change this choice to 2 and choice 2. So if we look at this now, I'll hit save, and we can now have a choice between yes or no. Not too difficult. All right, so let's do a different form. So let's pretend this is a totally different form. So I'm going to go underneath my first form and put another form and open that up. Give it an action again with just a pound signed in. And for this one, I'm going to have a drop down. And a drop down is a little bit more complicated than this. So bear with me here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a div that's going to hold this entire drop down together. And I'm going to call it select-wrapper. The name's going to be important for this tutorial, so it links up to the CSS. I'm going to comment that this is closing select wrapper to keep it nice and organized. I really use indents a lot when it comes to forms because they are so complex in so many ways. I'm going to give this a label, just like above, and this one's going to be a drop down for the age choices. Then underneath that, I need to put another div container to hold all the options together. So I'm going to call this class styled-select. So we're going to stylize it. And then I'm going to add another for select choice. Open that up. And I'll comment that this is closing the styled select. Perfect. You can see here we just have the word age. Now in between here is where we can have a select. This is going to be name, what you want to select. So name, select, choice, a lot of the same words going on here. For equals select choice. Again, this is for the form. It's not going to be for the CSS, but we're preparing like it is. So in the select is where I can actually put my options. So it's within there. So option value equals choice 1. And choice 1 I'm going to have be if they're a kid. Let's say kid. And then I can copy and paste. Thank goodness, right? And option 2 and option 3. Second one will be teenager. And the last one will be adult. And save that. So let's look at that again. So we have a whole div that's holding together a label and styled choice. And in the styled choice, we have select and 3 options. So if we look over here, now we have a drop down with 3 options. Not too bad. And again, it's not the prettiest yet, but we're just going to add some CSS to make this more aesthetically pleasing. We're actually going to add a lot to make it. It's not the easiest for forms. All right, so underneath that wrapper, now let's do this in one more form so we don't get confused. Let's do another form. I'm going to do action again with the pound sign. And in that form, let's do a checkbox and a button. So a checkbox is pretty easy. We would have an input, again with a type equals checkbox. If you remember up above, we did the type being a radio button. So after type, we're going to give it a name, which is going to be a checkbox. And we're going to give it an ID so we can give it some design. Checkbox. And then after, and you can see here, we already have, that's it for a checkbox. That kind of shows you how the checkbox works. Then after it though, I'm going to put a label, and we can pretend like this is a, I agree to the terms and conditions. Okay. See how that would work. That was easy. And then finally, let's do a button in that same form. So after they hit that checkbox, they can submit this agree to terms and conditions. So this is going to be we're going to put it in a div first. So we'll do div class equals submit button. Open that up. Comment, oh, this is closing the submit button. Again, I'm using my indents to keep this organized. And then inside that, I'm going to put a button. Type is going to be a submit, close, and then what I want it to say. So maybe I want to say submit. And there's our submit button here. So what I want is after they're done filling out this bottom part of the form, so only this last one, I want this to go to another page, right? We're going to have it then go to a checkout page. So in this action, I need to put the URL. So I'm going to do I'll show you an example, HTTP, and this one's going to just go to Google. This would go to your next page, like your checkout page. So if I save that, come over here and I hit submit, it goes right to Google. So it's almost like it's an Ahref, but in a button. All right, so now that we have that, I'm going to link my CSS. So I did the style sheet for you because there's a ton of style, and I tried to record it, and there's so much, it really added, it was a whole hour of looking at this. So I thought we would just attach it and review it. So we're going to go to our index and go to the top, and I'm going to link my style sheet. So link rel equals style sheet, and then spacebar href equals style, and hit save. If I come over here and press refresh, you can see all the pretty style that has been done for you. We can see that the radio buttons have the circle that fills in. The drop down has large, nice text, checkbox, and then the submit button has a hover. So let's just look at how that was done. So over here in our CSS, starting at the top, we have just the regular body background in our font, but then we have a form element. So the form is saying what the overall font size for everything in that would be, which is 1.5 em. We have margin, so it has padding to give it some cushion so it's not touching, and then the whole form has a width and a height. So all the forms are 70%. And then you'd probably want to change it to 100% in mobile. But this looks pretty good right now. Then I have a lot that's saying that what I want to border around. So notice how things have borders around it, and I listed them with a comma after each one to say multiple. That field set has padding, and then here is the CSS for the radio button. So this at the top. And you can see here that I kind of hid their button, added our button with some border, width, height. Without this radius, you'll see that it actually becomes a square element. So you could also have this be a square by deleting the border radius on the radio button. Different background colors, changing my pointer. So notice how here it's an arrow, and then when I hover over, it changes to the hand. That is changed here with your cursor pointer. And then this is the CSS for after it's checked. Let me refresh this so it goes back to save a circle. This is how it looks after it's checked. So we did another circle that's smaller. You can see here, the original circle size was 40 by 40. It went down to 24 by 24, but still a circle. And since this is an after, I need this content, display block, and then some margin to kind of keep it in the middle. Here's our drop down. So the drop down, let me do a live version again so it can highlight when I click on it. There we go. So that's the whole drop down, that whole section that has the select and the options in it. Again, you'll see a lot of the same things. Background color, text color, changing our pointer, changing the font size, giving it a width, but then I added a max width because I didn't want this to be huge when it was open. So I wanted it to only get to 300. So that might be changed depending what your options are. And then here is the before. So this is this little arrow that I added from Font Awesome. So you can see here that we have the font and then the content. This is our short code from Font Awesome. And then we added some padding. So underneath here, this is after it's selected, what it would look like. Our checkbox, same thing. We're hiding their checkbox and making our own checkbox. So this one you can see, I just wanted to demo here that we can do padding, width, and height with ems, just like we do font size. It's just another unit of measurement, like inches or centimeters. So if this is 1 em, it's actually, what, 16 pixels? That's the same thing. So you can use those interchangeably, which I do use throughout this document. And then this is after it's checked, what it looks like again, which is this little check. And then finally our submit button at the bottom, which has a border around it, a background color, a cursor change, a text color of white. I have this floating right. You might not even need that floating right. Let's see, that kind of will keep it on the left-hand side, so depending where you want that element. Our font size, padding, and then there's a text shadow on it, just to give it some dimension, display block, and then our hover effect. So this CSS I added for you, but look at it. Look at the documentation so you know how to change these elements for your site.